we were trying to leave, and then when we were leaving, the van started swaying so bad it felt like it was gonna flip over on the highway. So now we're back and installing a sway bar and new suspension. We were always planning on doing this eventually, but we just want to get somewhere warm. But we physically can't do that yet.
These axles are out of a 2010 F250, and we got this junkyard sway bar out of a 2010 F250. However, since this is a 95 frame, it don't work. So now what I'm having to do is cut things. I went out and found these little brackets. I think they're for the side of like a trailer, but they'll work. They're like 3/16 1/4 inch thick. And my thinking is to basically weld these onto the frame here, because we need to drop this bracket down about 2 inches because of the radiator, and then we also need to scoot it in. I think because this is a 7.3, the frame's kind of just straight throughout, while it kind of like goes like this and then straight, where the trucks kind of go like this, out, and then back in. Well, I essentially need to move everything in a little bit. I found these plates here, and I'm trying to debate whether to like do the plate, then this, or this, then the plate, or something like that. I mean, I literally just bought this plate because it's cheaper than buying a sheet of steel. You've probably already seen me, I cut this bracket. This is our like panhard bar bracket. So this piece was sitting here, but this bar would hit that piece. So I cut it off, and I need to recap it. So I've got some more. I'm gonna use some of this plate as well to recap that. I actually need to angle this a little bit more because you can see it's still gonna hit a smidgen. Cut that at an angle, then cap it. That way this is still supported, but it's out of our way from our sway bar. And I'm guessing these couple things are why the previous owner didn't ever put a sway bar on it. You can actually see this right here is where the original sway bar sat. Way up there, but it had a completely different style of sway bar than these truck axles do. This is a F250, F350 truck axle, and that's why it's 4-wheel drive. That's the only reason it's a truck axle, really. So I think the previous owner also took out the a couple leaf springs on the back, because this guy, it seemed like he only off-roaded this. So he didn't really care about ride quality on the road. What that means is I was expecting it to be able to hold the weight that these vans can normally hold, but because he took a couple leaf springs out, now it doesn't have that weight capability. So what we're gonna do is we actually have airbags coming in the mail. So we'll get some airbags on this guy to help support the weight. And the cool thing about this is I'll be able to have them on individual switches. So let's say we're on like an off-canter hill sleeping, I can air out one side and we can kind of level the van out, which we've never really cared about, but it'll be cool. So we'll get those going. The shocks on the back were completely blown out. I mean, like you could play them like an accordion. So we got some just cheapo auto parts store shocks for right now until I get to the back end, because we still have a lot of work to do underneath the van, as far as we need to mount an air compressor, a generator, a winch, and actually solidify the whole shock setup, because on common theme, the rear shocks are mounted incorrectly from the previous owners. So we got to kind of cut some stuff off and rework it all and get it sitting nice and working nice. But that's in a warmer place where it's not super windy all the time and super wet and rainy. So our goal is literally just to get good enough to get the heck out of here, so that way we can work on it in a better climate. We're just really ready to start traveling and work on the finishing products on the road rather than in a driveway. This wind freaking sucks. Haven't done this in a while. Designing parts. This is the bracket here. I'll drill holes through it so that way we can bolt that on, and that'll bolt up. And then this is kind of that other piece I'm making. So this will essentially weld to the side to hold it all together. Should be kind of nifty. Stuff sucks to cut through because it's so thick.
Do you want a little chair?
Yeah. Of course, my saw blade is in Vegas instead of here. Basically, this plate will sit like that. That plate sits there. and this plate sits here. And that way this thing you can bolt underneath it, and then I'll just make a support like piece under here to tie it all in. That's the left side. It's taken me like an hour to do. And then the right side sits slightly different because this frame's kind of like off, I guess. So I need to make the right side different than the left side. Either that or this axle's off, which I think it is, but. So something I kind of just realized is, well, I've known this for a while, but the whole axle kind of sits towards the driver's side more. The tires poke about 4 inches on the driver's side and 2 inches on the passenger side. So I started looking here. This appears to be a stock, I'm gonna call it a panhard bar. That's what I've known it as. This is like a 5-link setup. So it has 2 things on the back that kind of go like this, and then to keep them from going this way, that's what this bar does. It keeps the axle from swaying left and right. But this has a 4-inch lift on it, from what I can tell, 4 to 6 inch, something like that. I think it's a 4-inch. And so this is a stock panhard bar. So it seems like the previous owner put the lift on but didn't get an extended one. So why you would do that is because, let's say, whenever this suspension cycles, this is your axle with your tires and this is your body up here, it kind of does this little swinging motion when it cycles the suspension. When it sits stock, it sits like that, and because it's lifted, everything's kind of like this now. Everything kind of moved like this, and that's why we have the axle sitting further this way. Now, of course, I come to figure this out, think of this actually, after I cut out that side brackets, because when I hold this up, it basically sits underneath this side of the frame, but is about an inch this way or 2 inches this way of that side of the frame. So everything needs to slide that way. So essentially I should be able to order one of these that would be probably like an inch or 2 longer to move everything back that way, adjusting for the height. So if I were to take this and lift it up and cycle the suspension, like I said, it would kind of go like this. Because we're sitting like this, I need to extend this panhard bar to get it to sit right on top of each other. Now, that's not a huge thing, except when we drive down the road, we might kind of drive a little sideways, at least it'll appear sideways. On top of that, since I'm having to make custom brackets for this, it would make sense to get all of this lined up first before proceeding. So we got this bar here, solid. This bar here is my idea to extend this guy here. I plan on beefing that up. See how flexible this is? So this is our main steering rod, and see how the whole thing flexes? We don't really want that, and that's because this here appears to be too short. So like there's 2 inches of gap here in between. I mean, one idea is I could kind of get something that clamps on here better to replace this whole thing. Maybe I just need to tighten it up a little bit, but we'll see. I'd say that's loose. Oh, that's a bit better. I don't have a ball joint puller, so I can't pull this off. So I might just be cutting it and welding it and everything with it on like this. You going on a hike?
No, I'm gonna put this in our new net. I'm sure most of you know this, but living in a van with 2 people and 2 gigantic dogs, you have to use every sort of storage. And we were planning on making like a pretty top for above here, but this is storage space now.
It actually looks pretty cool.
So this is my backpack. We can get Lance's backpack in here. But what I really love about this net is...
I'm thinking, here, pull those tight on your side, right here.
So it actually has this little zipper pocket down here, which will be perfect for sunglasses, for wallets, for things that we don't want you to steal. So the backpack's just above the net right now, but there's actually a gigantic inside pocket the whole way too.
I'm sure you remember my tank here. I'll show you how I've got it set up. So for right now, I've got this strap on here because it kind of likes to slide. This tank, of course, is a different size than the one I made these hoops for, where it's sat good and nice and tight and all that jazz, so that's fun. So I put this little wire on so the tank can't fully slip out, but it does slide out of this ring. So for instance, like you can't get it over, you have to unhook this carabiner over here and then pull off the like slip knot basically. And then I just added this strap so that way it can't slide out anymore. And then this whole tank just comes out. Simple as that. This is my argon CO2 mix tank, so it's not for filling up the tires, although it could be full of like nitrogen or oxygen if I wanted. So there's been some safety questions about this tank being here. It's non-flammable gas. If the nozzle does break off and it wants to shoot anywhere, it's not going to go anywhere because I've got that big plate there. If it does break off the nozzle that faces this direction, it'll just blow all its gases out and kind of just push into that, and I'm pretty certain it's not going anywhere. I'm really not worried about the tank. It would suck if that nozzle broke off or the valve broke off, because that is a common issue and probably one of the biggest safety hazards when it comes to compressed gases in a tank like this is if they drop, you can break this nozzle off and they shoot like a torpedo or like a rocket and take off. So you do have to be careful about that. Matter of fact, I actually almost never set this tank up right, but then I hooked up my gas here. This is called a shielding gas. So for this type of welding, I actually can't have wind and whatnot, but it provides a lot cleaner welds. Pretty cool. So we're hooking up this welder. I did some cutting and some measuring. What I was able to do is actually crank the wheel and lock it and then turn the key and the steering wheel locks in place. And so it's shifted exactly where it needs to be, which is 3/4 of an inch over with the eyelet. And then I took my previous plates. I just cut the previous eyelets off. I'm gonna weld them on and then build a bunch of gussets and supports around them. So you can kind of see right there is where this used to go. So this is an aftermarket thing because the 4x4 swap. So it used to sit like that there, and now it's gonna sit about there, and then I'll have to brace it all nice and good because this needs to be perfectly rigid. Otherwise we'll get some pretty terrible chatter. Another awesome thing of, well, we went out and bought this solid bar here because I was gonna extend that track bar or panhard bar. Sway bar was still hit that bracket. So now with me sliding it over 3/4 of an inch, it should clear no problem through full travel. And eventually I'm going to take these bolts here. So these are the bolts that bolt into the axle. I'll either take these and grind them down and put a pin through them, so that way I can just pop it off and unattach the sway bar. Because part of the thing with sway bars is, yeah, you get a much tighter ride, but when you're off-roading, you don't want that. So like a lot of Jeeps will commonly have quick disconnect sway bars, so you kind of just pull those pins, pull the sway bars off and swing them up and out of the way. And that's basically the same thing I'm gonna do with this. I mean, honestly, I just want this thing to drive down the road right now. Yes, I do want to off-road this thing, but can't get to the off-road without being on the road. And right now it's not driving on the road. Let's check it out. Big monstrosity here. It looks like a lot's going on. Not the most beautiful thing I've ever made, I will admit that. But basically, that piece there, I moved it over. All of that stuff there is support. And I actually messed up and put this here. And stupidly shouldn't have, because this bar hits it, or sway bar, and part of this whole relocation was so the sway bar doesn't hit it. So Allie's in a meeting right now, but when she gets out, cut here diagonal like this, cut this piece off, and then just put a flat plate there. I didn't cut these thingies off like this because I need to shorten it. We'll see how well it goes because this is cast iron. Cast iron doesn't weld super good. Slightly crooked. It's hard to do stuff on the floor.
So these bags actually might not even work for the van. Most likely won't.
Well, this is the product I thought I was getting here. See how it's all short? And it's supposed to mount on the pre-existing thing, and that's like their last picture. But all the other pictures are this. So like it's a completely different thing that they sent. This is the thing I ordered. Now I just got to make brackets for here and there, weld up, and I think I still need to cut that down. It's better. In the future, I found some springs that we can replace. So like, see how this is like a 4-inch lift block here? They sell springs that are supposed to be better, that you remove this block and then just put one long spring, so it's supposed to just like ride better. Right now, it kind of seems like anything's better.
fairly late out. I just finished up out here putting the sway bar on and moving that track bar.
We're about to go test drive it. Fingers crossed, because if it works and we're running good and smooth, we are going to be leaving. So we're not going to just start driving straight away. We're going to drive around town all day and really test it. Hello. Really, once we leave here, we don't have a place to park up at that's free. It would be very expensive to park, and we've been parking for a long time. So that's where we're at.
I had I hit a bump at the front wheel. I wobble. But then it was just fine. I just did like a very tight little shake, and then I was fine. So I don't know. I guess we keep driving.